It's 10 a.m. The exam is in 2 days. Your notes are half read. Your laptop is open to YouTube. And he just sits there, staring at the blinking cursor on a blank page. Then he says the same thing he said yesterday. I'll start in 10 minutes. 10 minutes pass. Nothing. You know this scene. Maybe it's your room. Maybe it's your hostel. Maybe it's happening right now as you watch this. And at some point, you stopped calling it a bad day. You started calling it who you are. I'm just lazy. But what if that's the most damaging lie you've ever told yourself? Here's what nobody tells you. Laziness, as most students experience it, is not a character flaw. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not a weak mindset. And it's not a moral failure. It is a neurological response, a defense mechanism, a signal. And once you understand what's actually happening inside your brain when you can't start, you'll never look at yourself the same way again. By the end of this video, you won't just understand laziness differently. You'll know exactly what's driving it and what to do about it. Let's go back, way back. 200,000 years ago, your ancestors didn't have deadlines. They had predators, scarcity, survival. And in that environment, the brain evolved one fundamental rule: conserve energy unless absolutely necessary. Moving costs calories. Thinking costs calories. Effort, without guaranteed reward, was a risk the body couldn't afford. So the brain built a system, a powerful, deeply wired system that pulls you toward comfort, rest, and immediate reward. Every single time. That system is still running today. Only now, the threat isn't a lion. It's a 40-page assignment, a subject you don't understand, a standard you're terrified of failing to meet. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When you sit down to study and your brain screams, "Not now!" it isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. It's protecting you from the discomfort of uncertainty, from effort that might not pay off, from the possibility that you'll try your hardest and still fall short. So when you say, "I don't feel like studying," what your brain is actually saying is, "I'm not sure this is safe." Now here's where it gets interesting. Inside your skull, two systems are constantly negotiating. The prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, long-term goals, plans, the part of you that knows you should study, and the limbic system, your emotional brain, survival instincts, comfort, the part of you that feels like you can't. When these two clash, the limbic system wins, almost every time. That's why scrolling Instagram feels effortless, and opening a textbook feels like lifting weights underwater. But it gets deeper. Neuroimaging research has found something striking. When students anticipate difficult mental work, some of the same brain regions associated with pain response become active. Not metaphorically, physiologically. Your brain registers the idea of starting a hard task as a form of discomfort before you've even begun. So what does it do? It delays. It rationalizes. It whispers, "Start fresh tomorrow. You'll be in a better headspace." And tomorrow, you repeat the process. Over time, that delay stops being a choice. It becomes a habit. A groove worn so deep in the neural architecture that it starts to feel like personality. This is just who I am. But it isn't. It's conditioning. Here's the loop, running quietly beneath your daily life. Start to discomfort, to avoidance, to relief, to guilt, to repeat. Every time you avoid the task, your brain rewards the escape with a small hit of dopamine, temporary relief from anxiety. And every repetition strengthens the avoidance circuit. Eventually, your brain doesn't just resist studying. It begins to associate the idea of studying with pain, and the idea of avoiding it with comfort. That's not laziness. That's a learned pattern. And learned patterns can be unlearned. So if it's not laziness, what is it? After everything we know from behavioral psychology and neuroscience, it comes down to 3 distinct loops. And I'd bet money at least one of them is running in your life right now. Loop 1, overwhelm. Most students don't avoid studying because they have nothing to do. They avoid it because they have too much. 10 deadlines, 5 subjects, 18 unread notifications. a world that moves faster than any one brain was designed to process. When the cognitive load crosses a threshold, the brain doesn't rise to the challenge. It shuts down, like a computer overheating. And the shutdown doesn't feel like a breakdown. It feels like nothing. Blankness. The urge to watch something easy. The inability to begin. That's not weakness. That's your brain hitting its circuit breaker. Loop 2. Self-doubt. Pay attention to which tasks you avoid most. I'll guess the ones you care about the most. The ones where failure would mean something. That's not a coincidence. Self-doubt creates a paradox. The higher the stakes, the harder it is to start, because the cost of failure feels unbearable. So the brain offers a deal. If you never start, you never fail. And you take it. Not out of laziness, out of self-protection. Procrastination on important tasks is almost always fear in disguise. Fear of exposure. Fear of finding out you're not as capable as you hoped. Starting would require confronting that fear. Not starting keeps it safe and sealed. Loop 3. Dopamine depletion. This one is the most overlooked and possibly the most destructive. Dopamine is your brain's motivation molecule. But here's the thing most people get wrong. Dopamine doesn't spike when you get a reward. It spikes when you anticipate one. The problem? Today's students live in a dopamine-saturated world. Short videos engineered for maximum engagement. Notifications designed to trigger curiosity. Constant, instant, frictionless stimulation. Your brain has recalibrated to expect fast rewards. And studying, reading slowly, building understanding over weeks offers the opposite of that. So when you sit down with a textbook, your brain does the math. High effort, slow reward, low certainty. Dopamine flatlines. The task feels hollow and impossibly heavy. This isn't a discipline failure. It's a mismatch between the brain you've been given, shaped by an environment of instant gratification, and the kind of work that actually builds a future. You're not broken. You're adapted to the wrong environment. Here's the twist. Everything I just described, every loop, every circuit, every conditioned response, it's all plastic. It's all changeable. The same brain that learned to avoid can learn to engage. But the path back isn't what most advice tells you. Just push through. Use willpower. Be more disciplined. This fails consistently because it treats the symptom, not the source. You can't out-discipline a neurological defense mechanism. You have to work with the brain, not against it. Here's what actually works. The activation trick. Behavioral psychologists call it reducing activation energy. The brain doesn't fear hard work. It fears the emotional exposure of beginning. So you make beginning smaller than the fear. Tell yourself, I'll just open my notes. Not study. Just open them. Tell yourself, I'll read one paragraph, not a chapter. One paragraph. This isn't a productivity hack. It's neuroscience. A brain that expects pain will resist a large commitment and accept a tiny one. Once you're in motion, the resistance drops. Motion creates motivation, not the other way around. This is one of the most rigorously supported findings in behavioral psychology, and it's the opposite of how most students think about getting started. They wait to feel motivated. But motivation is a product of action, not a prerequisite for it. Start first, feel it second. The environment principle. Self-control is a finite resource, and the environment almost always wins. If your phone is within reach, your brain will reach for it. Not because you're weak, because novelty-seeking is a deeply wired instinct. So stop fighting the environment. Change it. Phone in another room. Notes from last session left open. One clear, single task visible on your desk. Reduce the friction to start. Increase the friction to escape. The behavior follows. The recalibration window. Here's something remarkable. Research on reward sensitivity suggests that consistent delayed gratification practice, even over a short period of weeks, can begin to shift how the brain responds to slower rewards. The circuits that once resisted slow effort start to recognize it as meaningful. progress begins to feel like its own reward. You don't have to rewire your entire brain overnight, you just have to show it repeatedly that slow effort leads somewhere real. Start small enough to sustain. Sustain long enough to shift. There's something worth naming before we close. A lot of what we call student laziness isn't just a personal problem. It's a systemic one. Modern schooling was designed for compliance. Show up, follow instructions, meet the deadline. Not for curiosity, not for intrinsic drive. So students learn to study for grades, for external pressure, for punishment avoidance. And the moment that external pressure lifts, during holidays, during self-study, during the long stretches between exams, the motivation collapses completely. Because it was never internal, it was borrowed. And then there's technology, a system built by the most sophisticated behavioral engineers alive, specifically optimized to capture and hold your attention. Designed to feel more rewarding than anything slow, meaningful, or difficult. You are not failing to resist temptation. You are an 18-year-old brain up against billion-dollar architecture. That's not a level playing field. So if you've been carrying guilt, real, grinding, daily guilt about your inability to focus, put some of that down. Not all of it. Accountability still matters, but some of it. Because not all of this is yours to carry. Here's what I want you to take from this. Laziness isn't your identity. It's a signal. It's your brain whispering that something in your system, your fears, your rewards, your environment, your pace, is misaligned. And the question worth asking isn't, "What's wrong with me?" It's, "What is my brain trying to protect me from?" Because when you can answer that honestly, not with shame, but with curiosity, the loop begins to break. You are not a lazy person. You are a person whose brain learned, very logically, to avoid pain. That's not a flaw. That's a starting point. So tell me, what have you been calling laziness that might actually be fear? Drop in the comments which of the three loops you recognize most in yourself.